Hello, this is Jim Lammers with Trinity Animation. I'm here today at Dimensions 3D Basecamp to talk about SketchUp for event design. I'm going to show you how we use SketchUp in a particular project. This one was for the Kansas City Chiefs home stadium called Arrowhead, a 50-year-old stadium, at least it was at the time we did the work, that had a lot of challenges and complex and interesting details, which I'll be showing you today. A little bit about me first. I'm the founder of a 3D animation studio in Kansas City. So I've worked in a lot of different kinds of animation production. And in addition, I have written some books on 3D, and I've also taught a lot of classes on 3D. Here's a little look at some of the work that we've created over the years. So a little animation background. A couple of major show business things we were part of. Starship Troopers, a big film in the 90s that we did 5 or 6 visual effects on. And also you'll see segments in here from a TV show called Archer. Archer is on the FX channel. We did 14 seasons. Well, of the 14, we did 10 seasons of the backgrounds. And so all the environments you see on that show are 3D and 3D rendered. You'll see a lot of other kinds of projects we've done, including medical, architectural, demonstrative, and just all manner of realistic and cartoonish 3D. A lot of our work in the past has been more in the realm of architecture and also furniture and products like that. But with some of the tools coming out, making those tasks easier for people to handle in-house, we're finding more and more we're doing complex 3D animations, like this fetal development animation, for example. All right, well, let me, I'll pause this, and you can see the covers of a couple of the books I worked on, and we'll talk a little bit about Arrowhead. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the client's needs and the situation there. It's sort of interesting. So the people who work at Arrowhead, they've got 16 spaces that they have to keep booked up with all manner of concerts and corporate events and weddings and similar sorts of things. So these are some of the names for those different environments. They can do them all at the same time. It's a really big stadium. It's got some big areas around it. And here let me give you a little look at what the stadium looks like in case you're unfamiliar. So here's a little look at the exterior of it. They've got a baseball and a football stadium side by side. And when the stadium was originally built, it was just kind of a flat bowl, but the area in question, a lot of it is on this side of it. You see the upper penthouse and press box areas, and then the areas down below here. So they have branding from Geehaw Field also. But people in Kansas City are really in the zone of calling it Arrowhead. And a little bit more aerial footage. And here we can see how it looks just looking straight down in the bowl. And on the opposite side here, you can see where a lot of the event spaces are. So those spaces include the large ballrooms, the Tower Club East and Tower Club West, and also fun places like the Locker Room Club and the Club 4, which are just kind of more like bars, just big kind of brightly lit bars. And then actual places where things happen, like the actual Chiefs locker room is a space, as well as the field. Things can happen on the field. They try to protect their grass, but they will have events that end up with people standing out right in the middle of the football field. Here's kind of a look at some of the spaces, and here's what they look like for corporate presentation or a party room with, that's kind of a bar. This is kind of more of a wedding reception dinner in one of those large ballrooms I was talking about. So the event challenge, as you could imagine, is they've got to give people an idea of how these are going to be laid out and what sort of events are happening. Anyone in event planning I'm sure has some understanding of how you deal with client needs and showing them what you're going to do for them. So here we have rounds of 8. We have a stage with a podium, we've got a big screen, and you give people a real idea of how it's going to look. Even in perspective, you can view it from any seat in the house and see how it's going to feel. So they really like that, because up till now, what they've been using are 2D CAD drawings like what you see here. So the person just has to have some ability to visualize that they're talking to get a sense of where those tables are going to appear. There was a couple of other drawbacks. As I mentioned here, the CAD files were a little inaccurate. They had changed things many times with improvements and additions, and they're always adding or fixing up something in the stadium. And as I mentioned, the prospects can't really figure out how it's going to look. And also, you can't really tell if there's some bad viewing positions, especially for people seated. Obviously, if they're right up against a column, you can kind of tell. Like here, you can see this table, the guy sitting on this side, he can't really see the stage. But, otherwise, there's other things to keep in mind there. These red boxes they put in to try to sometimes ask us to help figure out how to keep things away from the columns. So at first, we were just a SketchUp dealer to Arrowhead events, and they got a bunch of copies of SketchUp. They started working with it, and they asked for a class where they might learn the methods of SketchUp. So we happen to have a classroom at our company, and they came in and we did a classroom, and we started talking about the modeling, and it's a pretty challenging 3D modeling task. Somebody needs to get fairly good at SketchUp to do rooms and corridors that are all on a gradual curve, because everything's in a bowl shape in this building. It's a lot harder than simple 2D CAD. And you'll also notice even the windows here are slanted outward. So it becomes a real modeling challenge. So after some discussion, they decided that Trinity would step in and go measure and photograph and build all the texture maps and create all the 3D geometry and package the whole thing up so that they had a turnkey world for each of those spaces. And on top of that, we were going to make the entourage, that is the chairs, the lecterns, everything that they use from their own inventory to prop out an event, so that the SketchUp user working at Arrowhead events could just drag and drop rounds of 8 or chairs or lecterns or whatever they needed to set up an event. So we wanted to give them the feel of being in a space, but we knew that a lot of their people that were going to use this might not have very fast computers. They might be an older laptop and they're just going out in the field and showing it off. So we can't assume they're going to have some super 3D video card or powerful processor. And we wanted to make the component library something where all the furniture, you can see in this screen capture here on the right, I've just clicked on Tower Set 2 and just dragged into the scene, and I've got that prop ready to go in. This is what the locker room looks like, and each player has his name and a helmet on each of the different lockers there. So I think it's kind of interesting to learn a little bit about this stadium, and I hope you've got some interest in football and architecture and that sort of thing. I'm going to just give you a real brief story about the construction of Arrowhead. So they decided in around the late 60s, early 70s that they would build this double stadium. Both the Royals and the Chiefs are side by side. The Chiefs Stadium is the fourth largest at 76,416, and it's 52 years old now in 2024. It was first used in 72. So it's the third oldest NFL stadium in use. Soldier Field and Lambeau Field, I believe, are the two that are the oldest. Here you can see where they're digging it out and putting it together in the early part of 1971. If we could get CAD files for all this stuff, it would be T-square triangle type stuff. So this is sort of the father of football in Kansas City, Lamar Hunt. And he had a big impact on football. And I think it's interesting, even for someone who isn't that interested in sports. He was an oil man from the Texas area, and got interested in football and started with a football team in Texas. And he couldn't get into the NFL. It was a pretty closed system then. So he started his own league called the AFL, and with some of his friends and colleagues, I think they got 8 teams together and called it the AFL. So after that had been going a few years, they came up with the idea: what if we had a bowl, like they have the Rose Bowl and the Cotton Bowl and these other college bowl games? Maybe the AFL could play against the NFL in a bowl. And there's a really funny letter you'll find where Lamar Hunt said, I've got this idea for a combo thing, and I have a really stupid idea for it, the Super Bowl. I'm sure we can come up with something a lot better than that. But let's let's see what we can think of. And sure enough, they thought that was a silly idea. He said he got the idea from his daughters playing with Super Bowl balls, those rubbery balls that you can bounce around. And and so when they finally had the game, they just called it something like the AFL NFL battle, or maybe the Merger Bowl. But real quickly, all the newspapers and everybody started calling it the Super Bowl after they heard about Lamar pitching that as the first idea for it. So within about 3 years, what was the Merger Bowl or the AFL NFL fight had become the Super Bowl, and everybody loved that name, so it just took off and very quickly became the name. The Kansas City Star local newspaper had a big part in that. You can see when it was first built, you don't see any of that superstructure on the side. It's just a big stadium seating bowl without these large overhangs. So here it is after one of the big renovation. You can see by 2013 they had switched these over to be Jumbotron TVs and done a major renovation that includes a lot of the spaces I'm going to show you here shortly. But on this lower side here, you can see the big superstructure that includes the space where a lot of the spaces are. So, and here's what it looks like on a game day. You can see video screens that belt all the way around the sides, and you can see the big jumbotrons on the ends. So the task at hand for us then was to go look at these places and build them. So let me give you, we took some videos when we were working on it. I'm going to show you a few of those so you can get a sense of what it felt like to walk around. So this is called the Hall of Honor. This is one of the spaces. We're starting outside of it. Let me scooch along a little bit here. Here we go. So now we're in the Hall of Honor. These are shot not so much to get a sense of them, but we shot these as a way to come back in case we had missed a photo that we thought we might need. Let me step ahead a little bit here and show you what it looks like just kind of walking through it. So the Hall of Honor is really kind of a trophy room. It's full of artifacts and history and memories. It's a place where they can also have events, and there's some big TV screens to play things on. Let me jump ahead a little further here. So this is one of the spaces we had to do. We knew this one was going to be a little more challenging because you can see there's just so much complexity in there. Moving to the next one, this is the locker room club. So in this space, we've got sort of a bar-like atmosphere. Let me jump ahead here a little bit. And it's a fun little nightclub. But you can see there's a lot to build. There's complex ceilings, complex floors, light fixtures up above, and we need to make this all accurate and loading and playing smoothly on a laptop, an old laptop. Okay, let me show you a little bit of the North Club. This is another of the clubs. This one's a little more like a ballroom. Here we can see a very high ceiling. It's about 30, 35 feet. And a large walk-up bar, and then a huge ballroom. So these are for corporate events or weddings or things like that usually. They have a lot of art and sculptures throughout, and they needed those represented in here as well. So we had to capture all of the flat art, and at least in a simple way, kind of sculpt the 3D art that they had. And you kind of get a little taste of the fact that this is 50 some years old by some of the things that remain. For example, the electronics on the walls, a lot of them are just right out of the 70s. So it's a large event space. So to put that together, first we had to quote it and get their approval for it. And that was a complex task with a lot of estimation, as you might imagine. But we figured there would be some days of survey and then some days of 3D modeling and then building the entourage. So we went in equipped with a camera, a tablet, just a regular measuring tape, and a laser measure. The laser measures are like $35 on Amazon, pretty easy to find, and that allows you to measure things like 35-foot high ceilings. And especially when they go up and down, you can get the dimensions and the depths and that sort of thing. Obviously, the measuring tape for anything that is smaller. The camera let us capture things that we might later need to turn into textures. But surprisingly helpful was the tablet. The tablet would allow us to take a photo and mark it up like you see here, so that we could really rapidly go around and get measurements and distances and not have to do a simultaneous drafting job alongside capturing it. So you might say, well, you could have just gone with a LiDAR. You put the LiDAR in these positions, you have it shoot a segment. Yeah, we considered that. We don't have a lot of experience with LiDAR, so we'd have to learn how to use it. But the biggest thing with that is we need a low poly accurate model, and LiDARs usually give you millions and millions of colored points in a point cloud, and then it's your job to go model over the top of that. So it would have saved us some of the measuring, but I think it would have made other tasks a bit more complex. So we just chose to go with the old school method you see here. There were some CAD files that the ones that they were using for laying these out, but we thought we'd better check everything, and sure enough, there were things that were off significantly. So we went in and we measured it all. Here you can see me sitting down and measuring something, and you can see where we've got dimensions for each of these, where the heights are varying. Here's a typical annotated picture. You can use a little capacitive pen on a tablet. This tablet was just an inexpensive Galaxy tablet. You can get them for a couple $100, and they're great. More measurements, and here's me going around and photographing each of the museum items. We would be making texture planes for all of the items that are floating in the displays there. So this is some shots from what's called the Hall of Honor, which I gave you a look at before. So we've got sculptures on the left here. We've got all sorts of memorabilia, and we have the bridge with the Chiefs logo on it. This we would have to 3D model. And then those movies I showed you, I call this mopping up with a movie. So we spent about 3 days capturing all this stuff, but we learned it was really helpful to come back with some movies where we just put the camera everywhere. And then when we were in the middle of 3D modeling, if something came up where we were trying to remember if, say, a window mullion was hidden by a column or the ceiling changed in a certain place, usually the movies were there to give us the answer. It's very helpful. So just like a 5 to 10 minute walk around, depending on how big the room was, and just trying to capture every square inch. A few more of our shots of measuring. And then we also needed to capture everything that would be interesting that is a texture. So we had carpet, ceilings, walls, we had woods and metals and stones, and just all manner of textures to capture. So everything was captured, and then often we had to create an opacity mask, which I'll talk about more in the next section. But here's kind of what the image looks like, where we've got each of the individual shots, and then here they are composited into a block. Here's what they look like when you're standing in front of them. So they would not have like a perspective shift when you walk around them if they're going to be flat, but it still works pretty well, and meets the here you can see how it looks in SketchUp. It pretty well meets the needs of the presenter who's doing the event sales. So here we've got the bitmaps derived from photography and applied to the display boxes, and that's what the SketchUp scene looked like when it was put together. This area is kind of fun. This was called the Foolish Club. So these are the guys that had those AFC football teams. They were considered foolish because the NFL was just so entrenched to start up a whole new football club. So they kind of took pride in that, and they called themselves the Foolish Club. And here you can see we've got a big decal on the floor, a big photo portrait of them, TV screens on the walls, and then some text on some glossy panels on the sides. So we're trying to capture all this art. There's also a bunch down in this panel here, and we want to get it with as few shadows and from it with as little perspective as we can, because that's how you get your photographs for your decals. You can unshift them a little in Photoshop. You just don't want it to be too big of a job. But here's what we're able to do. Take a photograph from above of this floor decal and turn it into this bitmap. And then this is what's inside the display cabinet. And then this is our attempt to do the back wall. You can see some reflections. It's just really hard to get rid of everything. But since SketchUp doesn't do reflections, it might actually look okay. So we'll see what we think. Here is the finished SketchUp scene when you're walking around it. So there's the photo of the actual space. And then here it is in SketchUp. So we're getting a pretty good approximation of how the thing looks. Here's the side view where you can see the decals, and of course this is quite glossy here. Here's the decal. We were able to go through and use tools to get rid of all those reflections. And these are those AFL teams we mentioned. Those are the original 10 with their names. And here we go where we've got the actual SketchUp scene. So that gives you a sense of the time that we spent out there. Yeah, there was a lot of security and badges and things, but once we got past the gate, they pretty much just let us have 4 solid hours of going wherever we needed to go, and nobody seemed to bother us much, which was nice. All right, next up is now we have to go make the thing. We had budgeted about 50, 60 hours maybe of site photography and prep work, and then at least 400, 500, 600 hours of modeling to build everything for all these scenes. So we got their CAD files in, and it was a good starting point once we kind of chopped away all the areas we didn't want. You can see that there's a bowl shape in this stadium, and everything is built on a curve. And that's where I was later thinking to myself, yeah, it's probably not really a first project for a SketchUp user. This is a little much to do. So we learned when we looked at it closely was it's not on a pure curve, but about when you're close into the bowl, it moves more quickly, and when you're out here, it's slower. But generally, about every 10 or 15 feet, it would shift like 2 degrees. So it's really like kind of like an oval that you would make in SketchUp with a limited number of polygons going around. So you'll find that they're straightaways, but not for very far, and then it bends again. This makes it really complex because when you're trying to do things like clone out all these columns down here, there's no simple way to just copy and make an array of 20 of these. You got to move each one of these columns and then rotate it into place, or just build it from the ground up with its circumference and then extrude that. Here you can see the distance. It's about 3 degrees in this case from this edge to the next edge over. Of course, when you get farther out from the bowl, they go longer distances. So here is the simplified CAD once we brought it in and started to work with things. They had the grids for the ceilings in there, and then you can see the walls, and there's like a bar over here that was a fairly recent addition. They had built this bar out in 3D, but everything else was flat and 2D. So once we've gone in and made some usable shapes, we can do push-pulls to kind of get some beginning of orientation and start to build it. This is a great place to start where you know you've got the long boundaries of it in place, and you can start to create and have something to build around. So going from just simple push-pulls to this, as you can imagine, at this point we have to go in and start placing the art, start applying some colors, and even it's got a kind of a repeating pattern that's pretty obvious from up high here. But we've got a sample of the carpet that we've applied. We've built some of the art, which is just shapes that have push-pulls on them, and then little rectangular panels on the describing the art. We wanted to get all the signage in that they had. And a little more complex is this window grid because it tilts outward. So it's curving along the bottom, and then it's tilted outward as well. So it's a little more complex than usual in SketchUp. Again, a little bit challenging. So here, I think I'll show you a little bit of SketchUp itself. So here you can see this is the Hall of Honor. And we can go around and see what we've got built there. You can see here's the Foolish Club. And everything's in a 1-to-1 scale. Here you can see the reflection that's a little bit baked into that back wall. And from the right angle, it looks kind of more believable than maybe when you're way out. But it's a complex scene that will play in a lower quality laptop. Okay, let's go back and look at kind of sort of the beginnings of building the model. So this is an early scene from when we were just getting started, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of how it's coming along. So I've put in some of the letters and some of the little cuts that you see there, started to apply some materials and get it together. Let's go up to a top view and take a look at what we have when we just look at the lines that are there. So I'm gonna just hide a little bit of this. And here we can see how this appears when we're working this way. And you can kind of see where the angles break along the walls here. I think it's an easy place to see it. So we've started to do a little bit of the picture work. And here's a few tips in SketchUp that will possibly help if you are dealing with a project like this. I wanted to show you there's an option in SketchUp where you can create the local axes. It may not have come up before, but it's pretty handy on something like this bowl project. So if you built like a square and you put it in this corner here, and then you just tried to move it along, obviously, let's go down a little bit to like here, and then just draw it out. You can see it doesn't really line up with anything there. Nor does it really line up with anything there. I'm going to delete those, come back here, and this time we'll go ahead and build an axis that lets us align along that wall. So if we're going to copy something or build something, it'll already be pre-aligned. So that option is up here under Tools, Axes, and it's just looking, as you can see, for red, green, and blue. So X, Y, Z. We can come along the let me get back to where I was there. There we go. Gotta be careful about zooming out when I'm in a perspective view. But here we can orbit around so that we can snap this to the other end of it right there. So now that's our x-axis. Next we have the green axis for y, and then z. So now when I go in and draw something, you'll see that it's lined up to the wall. And if we want to copy something like this, then when I move it, it's also going to move along the edge of the wall. So if I duplicate it and then create some more out here, and then we could say x3, and everything's in line, at least till we get to the next breakpoint. So using these local axes can save time when you're trying to, say, put cut lines in this wall or otherwise copy out entourage that's going to appear there. All right, getting back, let me see here. Here we go. The next one is layers. We started by loading this CAD file up, and as you can see, you get an awful lot of tags, and these convert from the layers in a professional CAD scene. So you might find what you need to do is come in and select things and then move them to another tag, and then delete and pare down the number of tags you have. So if we select this one, select all, select this one, and select all that are tagged with that, then I could go in and take these items and, move them to another tag right here. Once a tag is empty, you can just go in and delete it. So there's a little process of cleaning up and paring it down and making it usable for what you're trying to do. Okay, next up is tileable textures. So if you're going to make woods and stones and carpets, you don't want to have something that's 100 feet long for a carpet. You need to make one small swatch that then repeats, and it needs to repeat without seams. So that's what we mean when we say tileable. It may have come up to you before if you've done much 3D with textures. There are a mix of tileable and non-tileable textures that are part of the SketchUp library, at least going back to older versions. Some of them, when they repeated, they'd have a real obvious seam where a texture stopped and restarted, like a wood grain where there's a cut point where it changes. So how do you make tileable textures? I'm going to take a moment out and give you a little look at how that process is done. So you try to take your photographs on the ground, and you try to take them in a way that you're mostly looking straight down without perspective, unlike this shot, and that the lighting is not really creating shadows or hot spots anywhere. But if you didn't do that and you don't have a great source image, you can still work off of this. So you can see that we're trying to take a rectangular polygon here that's in perspective that captures a good representative sample. It's good to kind of know how many feet and inches you're capturing too, because later you'll scale the texture to about that size. So in this case, you can see we've sort of looked at what appears to be over here the perspective lines, the vanishing point, and draw this rectangle out. Once we've got that, we can go copy and paste that into a new image, and now we need to unskew it. So there's a tool in Photoshop called Transform, and if you hold down the Control key on a Windows machine, you can just move the endpoints of that and get it into shape. I think on a Mac it's the Command key. So you can see here I just keep moving them iteratively until I've got it mostly in a rectangular shape, and then I just crop it, and I've got myself a starting texture here. So once I have that, the next step is to do what's called an offset. That's where we move all the seams into the middle. So you can go to this tool called Offset. I'll show you right here where it comes from. So Filter, Other, and then Offset. And then we can go in and put any number of pixels left or right, and you can see the seams all come inward as we do that. And then the key here is to have the wraparound option set. So anything that goes off the bottom comes back in on the top. So this brings your seams in. And now your edges are guaranteed seamless, and all you have to do is fix the seams you've brought into the middle of the thing. So that's usually pretty fast work once you've got your seams mostly in the middle. There's a variety of ways and techniques you can use for this, and some of the AI tools are just terrific at fixing these things now. But the traditional manner is kind of what I'm doing here, where they used to use clone stamping. Now I'm using the brush healing tool, which just samples from what's around it. You can see I'm going in and making the brush have a soft edge so that when I apply this healing brush tool, it doesn't leave hard edges. So it's a little more believable. And with just a few brush strokes, I've got all of the seams. You can see there's a vertical seam here, and then the horizontal seam right across the middle. It kind of worked out where it doesn't really have a strong seam on the right half, but everything else, we just need a quick few paintbrush strokes, and this should be tileable. Now, if this piece is probably something like, I don't know, 5 feet by 2.5 feet, which is a good size. As you get to smaller chunks, sometimes if there's a particularly bright or a particularly dark spot, they'll call that a birthmark. And what happens is when it's gridded out, the human eye picks up that repeating grid really readily. So you often have to kind of sort of dull it out so that it doesn't look so strong, so the pattern isn't so prominent, or choose to sample a larger piece of carpet so that you have a 10-foot by 20-foot swatch, for example, and you'll get better results. They don't necessarily need to be really high res, which takes up a lot of memory and possibly, again, is a burden on that old laptop that may be getting used. So in addition to these tileable textures, we have decals and emblems and graphics, things that appear on glass, for example, or that they're just stuck on a wall. So with these, we want to create sort of emblems. And the key to this is that SketchUp will respect a transparency channel if you use a file format called PNG. So here you can see we've put a boundary in and just cut it out. The little checkerboard means there's no background there. We save this off as a PNG, and we've got ourselves a decal. So here is the before and after of this shot from the Hall of Honor, and you get a sense of how it came out. Another interesting area we had to build was the field. So we even used satellite images and other pieces to put this together. Here we are out measuring it. Here I am puzzling over a bench. You can see the dimensions on that. And you can see the field as it has come together here. It's not overly detailed. It's it just needs to represent it fairly well. So the chairs are mostly done with texture maps. Here's an aerial photo for reference. All right. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer some of those. And next, I'm going to show you a little more about the Entourage, which is mostly furniture. So the idea here is to have the furniture all in there and usable in the component library. Here again, we had to take a lot of references. We're going to need a lot of textures, and we're going to need to sculpt this. So you can see the different pieces of it coming together. Here's a room that at the time had a lot of the furniture sitting out, so we could go put it together. And here you can see the furniture put in place. So I guess what I should show you is a little fly through of what we came up with. So here's a movie that lets you take a look. I can take questions while we tour around, but this is just using the walk and free flow from SketchUp. And the Entourage looks like this. I took a minute to use it right here. So we go to the component library, and all we have to do is point it at the folder where all the Entourage is located. And it's a pretty straightforward manner of dragging and dropping the pieces that we've built. Here's furniture sets where we've made combinations. So this makes it super easy for the event space coordinators to put this together. In the end, we got a great result. The event coordinators were thrilled with the results, and they've been able to use this ever since to demonstrate to people what they're going to get, how things are going to look, and adjust it before the day of the event. And then they can even use it for the setup crew to put things in place. Here you'll notice on this scene, there's little red boxes around the columns. Those are considered no-go zones. So that helps them also keep things away from columns the right distance. And that was another little adder that came up in the production of this project. The Chiefs have been doing amazingly well the last 5 years. My whole entire childhood, they had struggled. So their first Super Bowl that they won was in 1970. And that was before my time. So when I was growing up in Kansas City, they were really one of those, middle or down the list kind of teams the whole entire time. And it was pretty remarkable about 6 years ago when the Chiefs started to really become a very competitive team. And it was funny to watch them go through the process of at first being sort of underdogs to winning pretty well. And then now where some people almost seem to dislike them the way they used to dislike the Patriots. It's like, they've won it too much. I hate them. So that's been we always think of these guys as nice guys and our friends. And then we hear the people in Philadelphia really don't like them one bit. It's a lot of fun. So I've brought with me a prize I'm going to give out, and I'm going to ask a trivia question from my presentation. And if you have the answer to that, you will win a Chiefs Super Bowl hat. And with that, I think I'm going to conclude my presentation. That's at about 42 minutes. And I might go a little longer than this and hopefully take some questions in the middle. And otherwise, we'll wrap the presentation up around here. I have this video set up so it can continue on for a while and look around and show the different scenes. And I don't have to use my distract myself with it. But thank you all for coming. It's just been an honor to be a part of Trimble Dimensions this year. And I hope you learned some interesting things about event planning and event setup. Even if you're not working with a football stadium, I think a lot of these principles come into play. Trinity recently got a new project that was similar to this, and it's for a small convention center. So we went back out and measured it and started building it. Oh, interesting side point here also. These paintings are by a friend of mine named Charlie Podroberic. He does a really interesting stylized, cartoony sort of art. And the Chiefs are big fans of his also. So it's great to see his art out there. And there's even a plaque on the side here as a kind of legend to show you who's in the paintings. A lot of fun. All right, thank you.